Risk culture is interesting because a lot of people, including regulators like the ECB, are putting a lot of focus on risk culture. But when you take a step back, risk culture is purely a subset of culture risk. And I think it's important that you don't over-focus on risk culture, which is really just ensuring that there is a commonly accepted appreciation for what activities aligned to your bank's business strategy, what risks can derail the bank, and how much risk a bank or a financial institution should actually take. That's risk culture. Culture risk, however, I think is a very different aspect, and it is a far broader, far more all-encompassing problem, which goes from the top of the house to the bottom of the house. It impacts your policies and your procedures. It impacts your management, your board, the stature of your control functions. But also critically, I think what happens is that everybody puts a focus on the policy and the procedures. And these are then kind of, it's to how do we align this to regulatory expectation? And at that point, people seem to think a lot of the hard, heavy lifting is done. I think the key thing that the board has to do in propagating a proper culture in an institution is ensuring that the throughputs in the middle between the policy and the procedure as the inputs and the performance at the end of the day, it's the throughputs in the middle. It's the people, it's the presumptions, and it's the processes which take place. That's where they have to put their focus. And especially when things go wrong, because it's all too easy for a company's board to knee-jerk and say, we need a string of lawyers, we need a raft of consultants to come in and retune our policies, rejig our processes. In actual fact, those probably weren't the problem. The problem is these very hard to quantify components at the heart of how an organization does things. The interactions between different groups of people and the influences they have in terms of culture, the presumptions of what management think is happening as opposed to what is really happening, and the presumptions within teams as to how things should happen, as to how things really are happening. And then the process is what actually happens in a way that sometimes isn't even documented. That's where the focus needs to be by companies. And I think that's the massive change which this next decade is going to bring. And we have to stop just tinkering with process or with policies and procedures. I think that's the most important bit.